Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Rebecca Harper, Executive Director for Lake County Farm Bureau. Happy to have you all here. Just want to give a quick shout out to all of our presenters who most of them traveled 2+ hours to be with us tonight and to provide you with some additional presentations. So just really quickly, how this is going to work. We're going to start our night off with Jessica from the State Water Resources Control Board. After each presentation, there will be an opportunity for limited Q&A. And so if you'd like to ask a question, we ask that you submit that question via note card. Serena has note cards and pens if you would like them. Serena's right over here. If you could stand up, Serena. Yeah, so she's got note cards. If you'd like some, go ahead and raise your hand and she'll bring them around. She'll pass them out. And so after every presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. We'll get through all of our presentations, and then at the end, there will also be an additional opportunity to ask questions, time permitting. So if you have a question at any point during the presentation, feel free to grab one of those note cards, write your question down. You can just go ahead and put that question in the air, and Will over here will grab that question. He'll bring it up to me. I'll ask the question at the end of the presentations, and that's how we will get your questions answered. So does anybody have any questions for me? Oh, okay, Catherine's a jokester, got it. With that being said, bathrooms are out here. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the chambers here and the courthouse. So bathrooms just right down the hall. We do have some water and light refreshments as well. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I will turn it over to Jessica.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Bean. I am with the State Water Resources Control Board's Division of Water Rights, and I'm going to try and keep my Clear Lake Hitch update brief tonight because I know we have a lot to get through, and certainly we'll be happy to answer questions if you have them. So to start things off, I just wanted to give you an update on what we've been doing over the past year and then our plans for the next couple of years. We have quite a bit that we've been working on since we joined the Clear Lake Hitch Task Force at the end of 2022. We have been coordinating and engaging with a bunch of the folks here, our partners from both Lake County and the tribes and our agricultural landowners. So it's been really incredible to work with everyone. We've increased our water rights enforcement as well as our cannabis enforcement. We've been involved in some data collection and support efforts. And then we've also issued some information orders that I'll talk about a little bit, and we've started a groundwater surface water study. So I want to point out that if you're interested in hearing more details about all of the work that we've been doing, we did host a large information item at the State Water Board's final meeting of last year. And if you grab a screenshot of this and follow the QR code, you can get to that video link and you can see more details about the things that I don't get a chance to touch on tonight. Some of the presenters that are here tonight also presented there, but there's some other folks too. So there's quite a bit of information there that may interest you. So again, I'm going to touch briefly on our emergency regulations and then primarily focus on the groundwater surface water study that we have this evening. And I will make these slides available for folks if you would like to have them later. All right, so in 2023, at the end of 2023, the State Water Board adopted an emergency information order regulation for the Clear Lake watershed. And the purpose of that was to gather information to better understand how groundwater pumping and surface water diversions affect creek flows critical for the Clear Lake Hitch. So that emergency regulation was good for 1 year, from January of last year to January of this year. So the regulation is no longer in effect, and we chose not to re-adopt it, or the State Water Board decided not to re-adopt it. And that was because we had really good compliance with the information order. We collected a lot of information. And in fact, some folks have agreed to voluntarily submit additional information for 2025 outside of a requirement. So again, that is no longer in effect. But when we did send information orders out, they went to over 1,800 parcels in the watershed. And it may be a little bit difficult to see in this picture here, but this is a map of the watershed outlined in yellow. If you look at kind of the areas along the creeks, those are a yellowy color as well. And then there's a hatched area, which is the Big Valley Basin. Those are the areas that we focused the information orders. So while it applied to the entire watershed, we did not give information orders to everyone there. So when we did send out those information orders, we found that quite a few of the folks that received them were domestic water users or they were dry farming. And so that's where we stopped our communication with them and really focused on folks who were using a lot of water for agricultural and commercial purposes. And those folks submitted information on their groundwater well locations and information, their pumping information from March 1st to July 31st of last year. They submitted information on water use and crop types and frost protection events. And they did that in one of two ways. There were folks that directly reported to the State Water Board, and then there were folks that submitted through the Lake County Farm Bureau. And that was part of an MOU that we worked out where the Farm Bureau was able to provide a little bit of data privacy. And in return, many of the folks that participated in that are helping us with data collection efforts going forward. There was also another group called the Lake County Land Stewards who also provided information, but that was outside of the information order. So I'm pleased to say that we got 90% compliance with the regulation, which is extremely high for a regulation in general. It's particularly high for a regulation that is brand new. And I will say that I really want to thank the Farm Bureau and the Land Stewards, because I think that's why we got such high compliance, as we were working hand in hand with the local agricultural groups, and it really helped us to work with folks and get that information collected. And again, that compliance is part of the reason why we didn't end up needing to readopt the regulation. So I know what you'd like me to say is that I have information for you on what we collected, but unfortunately I don't have that yet because we're still analyzing all of the data. But we're planning to have that hopefully by the middle of the year, at least some initial information and some raw data that we can share with folks. We do want to be transparent about what we are seeing and the information that we've collected and share it with you. But I'll have to come back and do that at another time. So instead, I do want to kind of dive into the groundwater surface water study, because the information is going to be used in that once we are done getting it all together, basically. So the groundwater surface water study that the State Water Board is conducting is trying to answer these 4 questions. We want to understand how, if groundwater levels affect stream flows in Clear Lake. We also want to understand how past or present pumping affects groundwater levels. So when I say past or present, I'm really talking about how did last year's groundwater pumping impact levels, and is that still impacting the stream flows this year? For present, it would be, how does pumping right now impact the stream flows right now? So we're looking at kind of a time scale as well as that geographic distribution. We recognize that there's a lot of issues impacting flows. There's legacy conditions with gravel mining and barriers in the creeks and things like that. So we do want to also understand what else is affecting the groundwater levels and the stream flows. And then finally, how do we address this? And that's probably the big question that we hope to answer through the groundwater study once we have more information and we're able to run some models to do that. Okay, so just to outline our timing on this, we started data collection in 2023, and there was already data collection happening beforehand. So I want to note that we're synthesizing a lot of the information that's already been collected here for years. But there was additional data collection that started in 2023. It's continuing now and will probably go even beyond the 2025 date. We're also analyzing data now, and through next year, our plan is to do some preliminary data sharing, which I'm going to do a little bit tonight, and then develop our model and do outreach in 2026 and 2027, and hopefully have a final model and results for you in 2027. And then at that point, once that is all completed, we can consider management actions that could include potential regulatory next steps, but it could also include a lot of other things like actions and activities that could occur on the local level or voluntary actions as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, in the study, we're collecting information. So just noting what kind of information do we have already that we can use in that study. We have well locations and groundwater pumping use data from the information order. We also have surface water diversion and use data from water right holders. So anyone who diverts surface water has to report annually to the State Water Board, and we do have the information from those reports. We are using the seasonal and monthly groundwater level data that the county has been taking for many, many years, as well as information from the GSA and our tribal partners. And then we're also, we have stream flow data, which is great. We need to understand how that works. It's all over the place though. Some of the creeks, like Kelsey Creek, has a long history of stream flow data, which is great. Some of the creeks just started getting monitored last year or maybe a few years ago. And so that's something that we want to continue to do and look for funding to do as well, so that we can see what the interactions are there. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about my very preliminary data sharing. I want to stress that this is very, very preliminary because we don't have a model yet. That's something, we're still in the beginning stages of this study, so please note that. I also want to call out the beautiful picture on this slide, which I completely stole from Angela's presentation. She's going to show it to you later. You will ooh and ah at hers and not at mine because I blatantly took it, but I think it's a beautiful picture, and so I am using it. All right, so what may be happening? I'm going to step back briefly for those of you who need a little groundwater surface water 101. This might be helpful. So how does groundwater interact with streams? In a very basic sense, if you take a look at my stream flow picture here, this is a cross-section of a creek. So you can imagine the water is flowing towards you. And when you have a water table, the groundwater level, that's the black line in the picture. So when that water table is above the surface water flow of your creek, you have what's called a gaining stream. And it's gaining because the groundwater, you can follow those arrows, is flowing into the stream. So the stream is gaining water from the groundwater area. Conversely, if that water table is lower than the surface of the flow, it's called a losing stream because the stream will lose water to the groundwater area. And if that, if the water table gets so low that it's way below the creek line there, you get what's called a disconnected stream. And I show you all of these because I'm going to talk about gaining and losing streams, and it's something you'll hear about a lot when we talk through surface water and groundwater interactions. But this is something that happens, all of these scenarios happen in Clear Lake creeks all the time and every year. So in the spring, like we're in right now, when the water tables are very high because there's a lot of water, groundwater levels tend to be at their highest. You have a lot of water coming in up in the foothills, let's say, and as your river travels down into the basin, it's collecting water as it goes, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I have an image here from Adobe Creek in February of 2023, when it was a gaining stream. So it's gaining it's gaining water from precipitation, it's gaining water from tributary creeks coming in, and it's also likely gaining water from the groundwater, like that first picture that I showed you. At some point, that changes. And we now switch from having a gaining stream to a losing stream. And what that looks like is if you were to go back up into the foothills again, you would likely have water flowing, particularly in your bigger creeks. But as you follow that river down, instead of gaining water as it goes, it starts getting less and less. And then you might have a completely dry creek or close to it, like you can see in the Sigler Creek picture from May of the same year. And so that would be your losing creek. And so when that switch occurs from gaining to losing depends on the groundwater level, right? Because if you figure it's up when it's high and as it's getting lower, depending on what's happening, it can control if you have a gaining or losing creek. And again, this is a natural process. We would expect to see this happening. We should be seeing it every year. We're not trying to maintain high levels of flows all year round because that's not a natural process. But there's a question of when that switch should happen. And if it's actually happening sooner than it should. So this is what we're looking at, and we want to identify why that switch is happening sooner, if it is. So just looking at these very, very preliminary results again, and kind of taking a look at some of the streamflow data we have. Some of you may have seen this image before. We've talked about it at the CLIS earlier this year, and then at our info item we did as well. But if you take a look at the map, and I apologize, I don't think I can point it. Oh, I can, here we go. Okay, so here we have Kelsey Creek. Up here in the foothills is the blue USGS stream gauge, and then you follow it down. Here's your DWR red gauge down in the basin. So the water is going from blue to red. And in the graph here, the blue line indicates the measurement of the flow at the blue upper stream gauge, and the red is the lower stream gauge. And basically what this is showing you is the difference between a gaining and a losing stream. So when there is more water downstream and less water upstream, it's gaining, and that's what you can see here. So the red line is higher than the blue line from about, April to the beginning of May. And I have that with a little green gaining box there. And then right around the 1st of May, the switch happens. And now your upstream gauge has more water, and there's less water in the red line below at your lower stream gauge. So that's a losing stream right there. So you can see that switch happening. But what's important to notice is that in 2024, even though it turns into a losing stream, there's still a lot of water, relatively a lot of water, in Kelsey Creek, all the way pretty much through the end of June. So there's quite a bit of water that's in there. And we see this in the spring in most years. In even an average year, we would see something similar to this. Maybe the magnitude of water might be a little bit lower, but we generally see this. And it was very similar in 2023, the year before, when we saw that switch happen. Things get a little bit different when we have drought conditions. And so I'd like you to take a look at the 2015 graph first. 2015 was a drought year. And as you can see here, this is basically covering the same thing. Your blue and red lines mean the same thing. The blue line is above the red line the entire time. So that means that for 2015, Kelsey Creek was a losing creek the entire time. It was never gaining. Now, again, if you take a look at the red line, there was some water in Kelsey Creek until the end of May. So that's earlier, but there's still water there. I also want to point out that if you talk about that magnitude, if you look at the flow in 2015, you had, 20 CFS in there. And if we go back really quickly here, we had a maximum flow of 250 CFS. So when I talk about the flow being differently, you can see that there as well. But a few things to note about 2015, looking at some of the groundwater levels, they were not super high, but they weren't super low either. They were about moderate groundwater levels. Again, we would expect them to be at their highest for the year in March. The lake level based on, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the gauge on the lake, but the lake was at a moderate level too, 4.5 feet. And as I said, the downstream, it dried up about May 30th. And in terms of Hitch, that's probably the best we could expect for a drought year. Again, it's not fantastic, but there's water in the creek, and hopefully the Hitch can get in and spawn and get out. 2022 is an entirely different story. Also a drought year, but what we know is that the groundwater levels were very low in March. The lake level was below 1 foot. And if you take a look at the 2022 graph, also losing the entire time, but there was virtually no flow in the lower end of Kelsey Creek unless there was a storm. And so you can see the red, there's a little bit of red peak, then dry, a little bit of red, dry, a storm, and it comes down. And really the point there is that this would not have been a successful spawning season because the Hitch could not use the creek. And even if they could get in that little window there, they couldn't spawn and rear and get out in time. And so, again, this is the information that we're looking at, and the scale matters, and trying to figure out how this applies to the various creeks, not just Kelsey Creek. We just happen to have a lot of information there, not just the Big Valley area. We have a lot of information for Big Valley, more so than other areas, but we are looking at Upper Lake and other parts of the lake and other creeks as well, too. So I mentioned that we have information, but we need more information. And so this is kind of a request that I'm putting out today. We are already working with a bunch of people, and I want to thank both Rebecca and Will here because they've connected us with a bunch of landowners who are letting us use their wells to do some work and monitoring and also stream gauging. So we are looking for continuous groundwater level monitoring. I mentioned that we have monthly and seasonal data. You can see here, this is from Lake County at one of the wells near Adobe Creek. Each of those little dark blue dots on there is one of the data points. And then if we overlay the data that we have from the Big Valley EPA for a similar well nearby, you can see there's a lot that happens in between those monthly groundwater levels. And those are the types of things that we need to look at for the model to make sure that we can understand what's happening when maybe groundwater pumping is occurring and when there's stream flows that are going down as well. So if you have a well you're interested in letting us put some equipment into, we have lots of equipment and we'd be happy to have somebody come out and do that. We're also looking to do aquifer pump tests, and Those are a little bit harder to explain, but they're like a 2-week process, and we need access to wells that are not being currently used. We need a well to pump, and then we need wells to monitor. So if folks are interested, if you have wells that are not being used and you'd let us pump those to get some subsurface information so we can understand how water travels underneath the area, we'd be very obliged for that. And then I mentioned that we are doing ongoing stream flow measurements. We're not necessarily looking for more of those right now, but we could in the future depending on how much equipment we get. And so that's another thing that we need to continue doing. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up. This is our email address, phone number, website for more information. If you do want to reach out to me directly, I've also included my personal email on there if you have other questions.
Great. So with that being said, if anybody has any questions for Jessica, now would be the time to put your note card in the air. Otherwise, we will move on to our next presenter. So does anybody have any questions for Jessica? And again, if you think of something, there will be a brief opportunity at the end of the presentations to ask questions as well. Great. Well, thank you, Jessica. And we will go ahead and move on to Daniela Santana with HABEMATOLEL POMO of Upper Lake.
Good evening, everyone. My goal is to be faster than Jessica, but I won't talk fast. I just want to be more thorough. My presentation is going to be a lot of pictures. Rebecca asked me to kind of explain the work that HABEMATOLEL does, but also with how we work with other organizations, specifically other tribes, and also Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance in doing process-based restoration. So a little overview of this. I did do a more detailed presentation at the State Water Resources Control Board meeting, so it's also on that recording. But I'm going to be going over some riparian and wetland restoration work that we've been doing, explain briefly good fire and what that does for the Hitch and their habitat, and then also discuss some of the invasive species management that we've been conducting. Okay, so here's some nice little pictures of the Hitch, and this is what we hope the creeks would look like. Clear of barriers, clear of invasive species, but you can see in here that there's blackberries, and in Upper Lake, the blackberries cause a lot of barriers, and we'll see Hitch getting through them, but then they're all scratched up. So we've been documenting the areas that need to be worked on, and unfortunately, every time CDFW has tried to help us with the CCC crews to come out there, there's always water in our streams a lot faster than there are in Big Valley, so it limits the amount of work that can happen out there. So this is the first project I'm going to talk about, and it's the Clover Creek Restoration Project, and this project is actually a Robinson project. They were awarded a tribal wildlife grant through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but because HABEMATOLEL has land on Clover Creek, they asked us to partner with them along with Lake County Water Resources and the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance. So it's a lot of agencies working together and collaborating to restore habitat, critical habitat for the Hitch. It's a little tiny section. If any of you are familiar with the old Christmas tree farm that was out in Upper Lake, that's where it is. It was very heavily vegetated with blackberries. Terra came in, they mapped all the vegetation, and then they made a plan to how they were going to remove any invasives, and they documented everything. And then hopefully, as we continue to do the work on these projects, we'll be able to put fire onto the land as well. So Himalayan blackberry was the primary invasive species that we were targeting. And as soon as we removed a lot of that invasive species, the next season, the native species were able to pop up. And so that was great for reconnecting the riparian corridor. We also did a component in there for community outreach, and Tara actually led that coordination collaboration effort, and they invited HABEMATOLEL's Education Center. So kids came out and they learned about riparian habitat and the importance of maintaining land. And so the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance had little stations set up so the students can replant oak trees with acorns. And then there was 2 other species that they replanted, so they got to see all of the work be done. And Clover Creek, we always see Hitch in there. And this is also a section of creek that we monitor for observations, and we also have some equipment in there for our tagging study project. And then these are just some pictures. So this is Clover Creek fall 2023, and then winter 2023, and then on the bottom is November 2024, before it started raining, before that huge event came in. This was, I think, maybe 2 weeks prior to that. So there's no water. There was no water there. And then these are some more. So on the top, we have spring 2023, and then it's showing what it looks like in November 2024. I apologize for the red lines and the red boundaries. It might be difficult to see on that. And then on the bottom, fall 2023, and you just see the progression of vegetation removal in there. And then here's, this was done this season with the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance in Lake County. This is next to the Clover diversion structure. And then here's some more pictures. You can't really see the hitch in there, but there are hitch in there. And then this is a project that Robinson is also working on. They were funded through U.S. Fish and Wildlife through the BIL funding, and that is to do some creek restoration on Scotts Creek, mostly to stabilize the stream banks because there's a big erosion control problem there. And this is Scotts Creek at Tejada Ranch, and they worked with a private property owner. And so you could see the scour from the stream bank, and so they've been trying to mitigate that issue, and they're in their first year of that project, and hopefully they can continue that project, but we will see, and the tribes and Terra are continuing to collaborate on that. And upstream of this area, another tribe has the potential to have some more property that we can work on, so to reconnect that whole flow and take care of the erosion problem on Scotts Creek. And you can see that there's a big pile of debris right here, and this section is notorious for just collecting all of the debris that's coming down from Scotts Creek. It's right by Highway 20 next to Blue Lakes. And then here's some more close-up pictures. So down here, that's actually a hot tub that had floated downstream. So now all of this debris is cleared out of there. I haven't gone too recently. I went 3 weeks ago, and there's no more debris piles there, but I don't know with this storm event if the debris continue to pile up. But this is one of the biggest issues that happens on Scotts Creek, is the debris pile up. And then also on parts of Middle Creek, this happens. So Good Fire. Terra is all about engaging the community and engaging tribal members and getting them back to their traditional and cultural practices. And fire is one of those practices. Managing the land with fire provides multiple benefits. It reduces the invasive species, it builds climate resilience, and that's a big factor and something we're trying to bring back to across all the tribes. But it's sometimes hard because of the permitting processes and the way the tribes have reacquired some of their land and the status of each of those lands. So if there's a tribal trust land, it has a whole different permitting process than a regular fee land, which is just private property, basically. So that's one barrier that we're trying to mitigate as well. And then these are some cool pictures of the Robinson Tule burn, and this is showing how the Tule come back after fire, and it builds better habitat structure for the hitch. And then this is just a graphic of the acorn fire, and I'm showing this because after this fire, Robinson was worried about some erosion that was going to happen on their land. So then after that, they did some process-based restoration with beaver dam analogs. And so Terra, again, hosted a workshop with Robinson and invited community members and tribal member staff to come learn how to do beaver dam analogs. And this is just to slow the water down in the system and to prevent more erosion and to trap some of those sediments that would be coming down. So December, and then the picture with the water is during that big storm event that happened in November, and so the December ones are the after photos. So those structures held, and they've been working and they've been monitoring water quality at those sections and water quality downstream of those sections. And then managing invasive species, we want to do this to promote the growth of native species. Historical cultural uses of native vegetation include gathering materials for basketry, gathering materials for regalia, gathering materials for medicine, food, and also bringing the community together. And another big thing is tools for good fire. Lastly, I want to leave you with everything is connected, and this is how the majority of the tribes approach all of their projects. The majority of my programs and projects are all partnerships with another tribe or a county agency or a community member. And we can't just do one project by ourselves and expect it to be the most successful project. We have to be able to collaborate with community. We have to be able to collaborate with state agencies, federal agencies, and local agencies. So some obstacles that we face are jurisdiction and access. So if there's any community members out there that want to partner on any projects, we're always available. Permitting processes and agencies not having enough staff to process those permits is another obstacle. So we try and plan well in advance to get through some of those barriers. And then moving forward, we just need to continue collaboration, promote and implement process-based restoration, and hopefully do some land acquisition to promote conservation.
Great. Thank you, Daniela. And does anybody have any questions for Daniela? If you do, we'll go ahead and accept cards. All questions, yep, perfect, have to be submitted on comment cards. Any other questions for Daniela? Okay, so the question is there an opportunity to work with trust land that has been given to universities where we can culturally burn and clear waterways?
I would assume so. I would just have to get in contact with those people.
Great. Any other questions for Daniela? Thank you, Daniela. And we're going to go ahead and move to Felipe Laluz with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Just as an aside, Danielle and Luis have both been wonderful with partnering with Farm Bureau on events, outreach events, and community collaborations. So we've really enjoyed working with them, and I appreciate Daniela coming over to give that presentation. So we'll go ahead and move to Felipe.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Just want to express my gratitude to the Farm Bureau and Lake County Land Stewards and the community here in general. I'm really thrilled that there's some faces I don't recognize. I don't get to come out to Lake County too often, but every time I'm up here, I'm really impressed by how activated the community is. My name is Felipe Laluz. I'm a senior environmental scientist based out of Sacramento, where Ben is kind of our boots on the ground. I handle some of the more of the communication and coordination, and I heard lots of cats. So I'm going to talk about the conservation strategy, which is one of the bigger projects that we're undertaking, as well as the in-stream flow study, which kind of dovetails into the State Water Resources Control Board surface groundwater study. And then I'm going to talk about some stream bed maintenance and permitting. Daniela talked a lot about barriers and removal, and I want to just provide you all with some information on what you can do without a permit and when you would need a permit. Rebecca had also asked me to talk about funding. Unfortunately, we are in a pretty tough budget year across the board. There are still opportunities. Just one caveat is we can't fund private individuals or businesses. We can fund NGOs or local governments just in general. So if you all have a project that you're thinking of, say you have like a barrier or some sort of removal, reach out to us and we'll try and get you plugged into a group that can, pass the funding through. So don't, if you have ideas, I want to hear them. So the conservation strategy, first of all, just some history. It's been in the works for a long time, and I know some people in this room have put a lot of effort into it. Unfortunately, it's changed hands quite a number of times. And with different authors, you get different priorities, different structures, different writing styles, different sources of information. The May 2024 draft we reviewed, and unfortunately the department was unwilling to sign it. It still needed a lot more work. We recommended major revisions and are working with partners to enact those revisions. It's a community document, and that's really challenging to really get everybody on board. We want this document to be the guiding document going forward, and that's very tough. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of jurisdictions, a lot of different priorities, and so it's very hard to get everybody on the same page with this sort of planning document. However, for it to be this sort of seminal foundation, we need to improve the structure of it. There are also two processes to consider in this. There's a state recovery plan, which CDFW, which my department is working on, a guidance document for developing recovery plans. We're expecting that document to come out this year for public input. But in the background, we want this conservation strategy to be able to fill that role when that role is needed. So we don't want to have to start over again once we get our state recovery plan guidance finalized. There's also the federal recovery plan. If Clear Lake Hitch gets federally listed, currently they're only listed by the state, we want the conservation strategy to be able to serve as the federal recovery plan also, again, so we don't need to restart the process if they do get listed federally. So I provided some information up here. These slides I will happy to share with anybody. So we have identified some issues with the draft that's currently on the county website, largely with organization and readability. There's a lot of great information in there. It's just very difficult to follow through. So what we want the conservation strategy to be, we want anybody to be able to pick it up and read it and say, oh, this is what they're doing and why they're doing it. It currently lacks that level of detail and organization, as well as a logical reading order. There's information spread throughout the document and recommendations spread throughout. We want to have a better structure so it's more easy to navigate. And we feel that this is going to improve transparency and the usability of this document. So this kind of Venn diagram on the right is kind of when I first started working on Hitch, this is how I looked at it. There's all these overlapping, interacting factors or threats that impact the population: harmful algal blooms, habitat, competition, predation, invasive species, connectivity, water, and all of them overlap and interact in complex ways. So we want to structure the document to identify each of these threats and take a systematic approach to address each of them. There's also missing sections that we still need to write. A big part is the continued collaboration section. So we want to develop a section that really outlines and specifies how we interact with local government, with the Watershed Protection District, with Public Works, and how we get that information to the public, as well as how state and federal agencies interact with each other. We want to develop criteria or performance measures. You know, it's great to say, like, restore wetlands, but we want targets to work towards. You know, that's a scientific process where, you know, you do something, you measure it, and then you reassess. As well as a timeline for update, reviewing, and reporting out. So most of the authors have agreed to a 5-year review period. It doesn't state that anywhere in the current draft. So that sort of interaction, that sort of structure is something that we want to build into it. And we need a transparent and structured process to complete and update it. So I'll be working with the Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee and the Ag Committee, as well as the other agencies, to get input and finish this document. The process for getting this done. So if you look to the right, it went from this kind of messy Venn diagram to something more structured. We've restarted monthly meetings. I've taken the lead on that. And we've developed a clearly structured outline. You know, I think of it as, you know, we have a lot of car parts. We want this outline to be the instructions to take all those parts and build a functioning car. The draft outline is currently under review by partner agencies and tribes, but we will be requesting input through the Fish and Wildlife Advisory Committee and the Ag Committees, as well as others. And I've told Rebecca that this presentation, this process, I would love to have the Farm Bureau's board, get input on that, because we need, we need to know that this document is useful and understandable. So if you all pick it up and go, this doesn't make any sense, that means we're not doing our job. We do have a joint meeting with the Fish and Wildlife Advisory and Ag Committees in this room on March 27th, I believe, from 6 to 8. And we'll start the process there. And part of the discussion there will be determining how we will receive input and the frequency with which we'll review it. So once we get this outline, we have the draft outline. We're already starting to populate it with information from the current draft. And I want to emphasize that there's a lot of good information in that draft. A lot of work has gone into it. We're just kind of moving some pieces around and filling in some gaps. Once we get that outline more or less agreed upon, we'll write the sections based on that outline, flesh it out. A lot of the language already exists. We'll resolve the prior comments from various agencies and entities that have submitted comments, and then get a final review, edit, get all the citations in there, sign it, and implement it. And then over to the right, this is kind of how it's structured. So the main components are threats. So in this top box is kind of cut off, but it's the scientific assessment. That'll list all the threats. That's a big part of the outline. We want to know which threats are actually impacting the species, even perceived threats, so that we know what we need to look at and unknown questions. That scientific assessment will also cover the biology and status and other information for the species. And then we'll switch down into this next section, the recovery strategy, which will be made up of goals. So a goal is to really speak to a direct threat. For example, if a threat is predation, the goal would be either to better understand how predation affects the population, or to mitigate or prevent the predation from impacting. The goals will be general, and they need to be general so that they can be flexible, because we need to adjust as we move. Beneath each goal will be a series of objectives, and this is a condition needed to achieve that goal, and these are going to be adaptable. So, for example, predation, thinking of common carp. Common carp are known to prey on eggs of Hitch and larvae. So that would be the goal, would be to assess the impacts, assess and mitigate the impacts of common carp. The objective would be to either measure that impact or reduce that impact through, for example, the carp management effort that Robinson Rancheria is leading. And then finally, down into the implementation strategy, these are the specific actions. So carp management program is very general. Specifically would be the plan to enact that carp management action, as well as criteria or performance measures that we want to achieve. And then there's that arrow going back to the goal, which is once you've done something, you want to stop and take a look and say, have we achieved this goal? So this is just a scientific process. It's iterative. And this will be on this sort of 5-year timeline where we'll be able to come back and say, like, this is the progress we've made, report out, and reassess from there. We might be able to check off some goals. There might be new goals and subsequent objectives and actions. I know that was a lot, but feel free to write down those questions. I do want to hear from you all. I'm transitioning now to an in-stream flow study. So we have an in-stream flow unit within the department. They are undergoing an in-stream flow study to determine minimum flows, to characterize the stream flow and habitat relationships for Clear Lake Hitch. So basically identifying where minimum flows needed in certain areas. This is building on the 2D hydrodynamic model that Big Valley Rancheria developed, which is on their website, and we're expanding it to the broader watershed. We're focusing on Middle Creek, Scotts Creek, Manning Creek, Adobe Creek, Kelsey Creek, and Coal Creek, just based on their importance as Hitch habitat and the availability of data. This is the first study of this type that's done for a non-salmonid species. These studies are typically done for salmon and trout. This is the first time it's been done for a native minnow that's pretty exciting for me. I may be a little biased. Oh, I'm sorry. That's what happens when you borrow other people's slides. That was Jenna Rindy who's leading the study. So current progress. I'm not going to go deep into this. We have a ton of data. In-stream flow study has collected a ton of data on the shape, the depth, the structure of the streams. And all of that will go into a complex model, which is a little above my technical expertise. But we are hoping to have a draft report in fall of 2025, which we will share pretty widely for public input and begin to get that information out, share, of course, with the Water Resources Control Board, but of course also with all of you. Transitioning now, I know this is kind of jarring, I'm bouncing around a lot, but these are the three big things I wanted to talk about. Stream bed maintenance. And so there is a lake and stream bed alteration agreement, which is a permit that folks need when they're doing work within the lake or in the stream. But there's a lot of work that you can do without a permit. So basically a permit is needed when you're breaking the ground, when you're bringing in heavy machinery or when you're disturbing soil, including removing roots. So using equipment that alters the creek bed, bank, or channel, digging, dredging, that sort of thing, driving pilings, installing culverts, bridges, low water roads, retaining walls, piers and boat docks, or removing the vegetative root structure. So anything that disturbs the soil, you will need a permit. But you can go in and cut and trim overgrown vegetation. You can remove debris from the channels, like the work that Daniela showed, some of the before and after pictures, as well as the work we're doing with the California Conservation Corps. You can go in and remove any of that debris or garbage, vegetation, without a permit. We just strongly recommend that you do not, if you do brush clearing or that sort of thing, don't add that to the stream, because it could result in flooding or get washed downstream and cause problems for your neighbors. If you have any questions about this, contact the Lake and Stream Bed Alteration Group. Claire Bryant will come out and help you out and determine if you need a permit or help you start the process of developing the permit. There are instances where you don't have time for a permit. And I know Lake County is no stranger to flooding. So in emergency situations, when debris or vegetation becomes stuck and you need to get in there and fix something in an emergency, we can use an emergency notification process. And for those of you who are thinking of doing this, I strongly encourage you to reach out to our LSA group and get the details on it. But if it can't be remedied by hand and equipment is needed, to protect your property or protect properties downstream, you can go in and do the work. You just have to notify the department within 14 days. And there's lots of information on our website. And again, please reach out to the Lake and Stream Bed Alteration folks or me to get you more information on that. We don't want fear of needing a permit to prevent you from protecting your property. And that's it. Thank you. I put my contact information up here, and I'm serious when I say reach out to me. I have a stack of business cards. If you want these slides, I want to hear from you, especially on the conservation strategy. For those of you who have either worked on it and are no longer in the group, or for those that want to contribute, I do want to hear from you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Felipe. We'll go ahead and accept any questions for Felipe at this time. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise it up, and we'll accept those. Also, just really quickly, like I said, we will have an opportunity for questions at the end. Also, I know we have a couple of folks on Zoom, so if you are on Zoom, I dropped it in the chat. But if you have any questions, feel free to enter those into the chat, and we'll get those read at the end for our Q&A as well. So we've heard from several presentation the negative effects that blackberries have on fish spawning and migration. So this question reads, blackberries are bad and need to be removed. It seems to be a waste of time to remove them without pulling out the roots. Do I need a permit for removing blackberries?
Yeah, and for just cutting them off at the surface, you do not need a permit if it's above the ground. If you are removing the roots, you will need an LSA permit if you're digging down to remove them within the stream or bank. So if you're outside of the stream, if you're adjacent, I believe you're okay. I would have to check with the LSA folks. But again, I would reach out to Terra, who do this and are quite effective at this invasive species management. And that's a potential partnership, even just to get the information on how they manage blackberries. They're pretty, stubborn, to say the least. And I recognize that that's a real challenge, but you would need a permit if you are digging in the stream bed.
Okay, so the next question has two parts. The first of those parts is, how are we going to get water in the stream so fingerlings can make it back to the lake? I'll let you have the first one because the second one is not necessarily related to that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There are programs, I believe in the Russian River, where there are folks that do voluntary releases, people that have permitted water storage that do releases. I think the big part is to keep the water flowing before, while they out-migrate. The tribes partner with us and provide a valuable service in fish rescues. So we don't, again, they have, just to be clear, they have a memorandum of understanding with us to handle these fish. They're listed, so we don't want the public to go out and move fish. But the tribes are really provide this valuable service for us of actually coming and removing the fish and moving them back to the stream. So worst case scenario, we can do some fish rescues. If you do know of problem areas where fish get stranded, I know Coal Creek out at Farrow Road, Farrow Place is a big problem area, and we're aware of some other problem areas. Let us know, or let Daniela and Luis know, or Alfred, any of the tribal biologists, or Ben, or email me and I'll put you in touch. Fish rescues are kind of a last resort and a Band-Aid, but we do want to keep water flowing in the streams, and we're gathering the information to see what actions we could take to help.
So I'll read another related question to that, but I don't know that you're the appropriate person to ask, so we may defer this to another presenter. But can we get water from Highland Springs to help with hitch rescues?
I'm not the right person to ask.
Okay, we'll defer that to Angela later. And then lastly, I have, can we hold a class to teach people about how to fill out and submit the permits?
Oh, great question. Yes, I'll take that back. And I'll be fully transparent. Yeah, we're not the best communicators, and our processes can be difficult. I think we've had requests for even just clarifying jurisdictions among agencies. I could reach out and see if we could have like a Clear Lake specific class. And I think that would be valuable. I'm glad somebody recommended that. Thank you. Because we do want to get this information out. There's a lot of information on our website, which isn't always easy to navigate. So I think in the short term, the best solution is to just email that LSA2, R2LSA. So it's Region 2 Lake and Stream Bed Alteration, or email me, and we'll be able to put you in touch with the appropriate permitting group. So Lake and Stream Bed is specific to Lake and Stream Bed. There's a whole slew of other permits that we handle, but yeah, I do think we need education materials, but ask us if you can't find it on the website.
Yeah, and if anybody needs connected to Felipe, for some reason you can't find his contact information, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect to you. Any other questions or question cards for Felipe before we move on to Ben Ewing from CDFW? Got one more. Yeah, watch your handwriting. If it's illegible, I'll throw it out. Okay, so is there a reason why hitch behavior is not a specific topic? For example, hitch may spawn in a stream in one year, but then not spawn in that stream the next year for some reasons. Why is that, and should we be talking about it? Should it be studied?
Thank you, Mr. Windrum. And we've discussed this before. I remember we had a discussion about bass aggregating at the mouths of creeks during the spawning run. it is a topic, and that is something we could add to the outline as either an unknown or something that needs further investigation. I'm sure there's a lot of academics who would jump at the opportunity to study this further. Funding limitations, of course, play a big role in that. But it is an unknown that we do want to investigate further. One of the emerging hypotheses is that really it's connectivity is one of the bigger issues. Is that, we saw 2022 was a dry year where these fish were really weren't able to move between areas. But then in 2023, we saw a lot of fish that appear to have hatched in 2022. And a lot is a relative term. I shouldn't say that. But there are a lot of unknowns on how hitch behave, when they spawn, and what controls their spawning. They're not a sport fish, so there's not a lot of studies on them. So we really are learning a lot about the species. They're very resilient. And kind of that's one of the reasons why we're so concerned, is that they're such a resilient species. To see their populations decline is really sort of scary. But yes, behavior is another aspect that we should address in the conservation strategy. And if you have specifics, please send them my way. I want to get that information. Thank you for that question.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Felipe. We'll go ahead and move to Ben Ewing from California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We'll get that presentation queued up, and Ben will join us for his presentation.
Hi, my name is Ben Ewing with Fish and Wildlife. Thanks for having me. I'm here to just give a little update on the continued monitoring that we're doing and some of the ongoing projects we got happening in the Clear Lake for the Hitch. Currently we have CDFW does 3 different surveys to try to get an idea of what's going on with the Hitch population. The first one I'm going to talk about are their visual surveys. We have 21 sites across the Big Valley tributaries on 7 tributaries: Magaslou, Adobe Creek, Coal Creek, Manning Creek, Kelsey Creek, Hill Creek, and Thompson Creek. We've been doing these studies since 2014. So these same sites, so it's been a pretty good track record of just our consistency of the same sites over many years, and being able to get some historical data and stuff to be able to compare to from year to year. The next survey is our relative population estimate, where we do a mark recapture study at 4 sites on Clear Lake: Holiday Harbor, Canoctai Casino Harbor, Clear Lake State Park, and Soda Bay. We've been doing this since 2019, and we've been trying to do it, and for the most part, even during the COVID restrictions, we've been able to do try to start from mid-March through mid-May. So we're out there for 10 weeks. We just started today. We just started our season today. And from today, I can only go from today. Today would look pretty good out there as far as relative numbers compared to previous years. At this time of year, we saw we almost collected almost 100 hitch today, which was a good deal. And we'll plan on being up here next week doing our same 4 sites. Our third survey that we do to try to get an idea is our general fish survey, and we do that generally in June. We have 18 random spots, the same 18 spots, and those are randomly all over the lake itself. And in that survey, we collect all fish, not just hitch, but pretty much every fish except like bait fish like silver sides and threadfin shad. But that's a good survey because we collect lengths and weights of all the different types of fish species out there, and it's a good idea to see how the hitch population is doing relative to all the other fish that are in Clear Lake. The most recent results from our visual surveys, it's been up and down obviously, but last year it was down from our record number in 2023. Again, like Felipe touched on it a little earlier, we're still trying to figure out a little bit more why, because there was still lots of water in the creeks. But maybe finding some more information on maybe these hitch aren't obligatory spawners every year, because they're spawning somewhere. And last year there was no shortage. It wasn't the record year, but there was still a lot of water in the creeks. And I was expecting a little bit more. We did get almost the same amount of hitch collected in our in-lake surveys. So, I'm wondering if some of these hitch don't have to go in every year to spawn. And with the high water year that we're having, there might be the conditions were pretty good to be able to get some spawning off in the lake itself. These are the results from last year's, the total number of hitch collected. We were almost on par from the record number we collected in 2023. And it was unfortunate. I think we almost would have got more last year. We only were able to sample 9 weeks out of 10 due to there was a large bass tournament going on in the middle of the week, which usually doesn't happen. So out of respect, we didn't want confrontations and stuff. There was boats. It was a big tournament, so we passed up that week. So, but we almost collected almost 1,000 total out of the 9-week survey last year. Here are the results from our general fish survey from 2015 and then our 2023. A lot more fish numbers total and different species collected in 2015 compared to 2023. One of the bright spots, I should say, was the Clear Lake Hitch was, number 3 out of total species in 2015, which was good. It wasn't a lot of numbers compared to like largemouth bass and bluegill, but and then in 2023, it was the second most collected fish species, so that was good. Today, I would say the hitch, just off today, it was probably the greatest number of single species today, I think, collected. There was a lot of, it was looking pretty good, but the conditions on the lake were a little bit tougher today. It would have been if it was real windy and turbid. So we'll keep going out there, and again, we're planning on doing our general fish survey again this year and be able to compare it. And but you can sort of see how the hitch is stacking up to the other species total. Some of the future projects we got going on is we're still assessing water diversions, the stream flow parameters, and groundwater parameters. We're also working on, and it was touched on a little bit earlier, about our common carp and goldfish reduction, which will aid in in-lake spawning for hitch, especially during seasons where the tributaries may not have enough water for the hitch to go up in. So I believe it's critical for these hitch to be able to get some in-lake spawning to keep them going. One thing I wanted to add too was that we are still continuing. It was touched on a little bit earlier with the seas work. The department is still working with the CCC crews to continue to do vegetation removal in the creeks. And again, if anyone knows any heavy, thick vegetation going through properties, please reach out to me. I could put you guys in contact with. We can put it on a list and maybe get it added to the list for the CCCs to be able to come out and help clear a lot of vegetation. I didn't bring the slides this time on this because I showed a lot of those slides at the last Farm Bureau talk, so I didn't want to be too redundant, but we had some before and after pictures if people want to see, but the CCCs have been doing some really great work and opening up a lot of passage issues that were really difficult for the hitch. So recommendations, we're still trying to monitor the relative abundance. That'll be ongoing because we have to keep a pulse on what's going on out there. trying to reduce the amount of illegal water diversions on Hitch spawning tributaries. Educate the public of the importance of Hitch as an indicator species for a local community and ecosystem. What's good for the Hitch is going to be great for the lake and the watershed, I believe. So if we take care of the Hitch, and bring that Hitch back, it's going to be a really good thing for everybody. Preserve and restore the Hitch rearing habitat around Clear Lake. We just recently hired someone at CDFW, biologist. He wasn't able to make it today, but he's working on assessing a lot of the remaining Hitch barriers in the watershed. Two of the big ones that we're still working on right now is Bell Hill Road at Adobe Creek with the culverts there, and the county's making some headway on that one, which is really good to hear, and I'll let Angela talk about that. And the Kelsey Creek, this picture right here, the Kelsey Creek Main Street Bridge is a big one that we're still working on. And we're going to continue to work with Robinson Tribe, who is the lead on reducing carp and goldfish. The last year was the first year that CDFW has began removing any carp and goldfish seen during our Hitch surveys that are directly predating on Hitch's eggs and young of the year. And we're working on, we reached out to many people, and if anyone in this room knows of anyone that could use a lot of carp and goldfish for fertilizer and uses, right now we've been donating on tribal lands. They've been using them on tribal lands for fertilizers. Some of them have been going to some of the tribes for food, but if anyone, we're open, because this is going to be an ongoing project. So if anyone has any ideas or ways that we can utilize these fish, please reach out. Here's a picture of a recent. This is up at Tule Lake, and the Robinson Tribe was able to go out there, and I think in like a half hour, we're able to collect this many carp and goldfish that were in that lake, and which is a really good thing, because I think it's one of the rearing grounds for the carp and goldfish in the lake. And we've been able to work with the landowners up there and get some access, and we've been able to really get do some damage. They've been able to do some damage up there, and we've also collected some Hitch up there too. So just wanted to include that picture, but that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. And just really quickly before we accept any questions from the attendees, I was curious if you might be able to provide some additional context regarding how the in-lake survey numbers are used, because I get so many questions about that. And so you're obviously one of the best people to explain that.
So the in-lake surveys are just one piece of the pie. So between the three surveys that I do, the in-lake survey is a way I can mark and recapture a set number of Clear Lake Hitch at 4 sites that we designated as historically pretty good numbers of Hitch at the 4 sites that I talked about. They've been consistent, and so we're just trying to keep something consistently to be able to go back to and reference to. I know those 4 sites. I've been shocking this lake since 2012, and being able to use those 4 sites as a relative idea. Again, these are relative population estimates. We know it's a mark recapture study, so we mark the fish, and if we collect them, we plug them into a formula, and it gives you a relative idea of how the population is doing. Again, these aren't. Those numbers that we come up with the relative population estimate, I'm not speaking for the entire lake. And for me to give a population estimate of the entire lake, we have to do pretty much the entire shoreline. So these are just relative numbers of 4 good sites that I've seen good Hitch in the past, and being a way to be able to monitor, and within our workload. It's only, I get the help from a lot of people, but we only have right now 1 e-boat, And to be able to shock the entire lake would take, 3 or 4 weeks with like multiple boats. So it's just a way to be able to get a ballpark idea of what's going on out in the lake.
Thank you. Okay, so the first question is, why is there not a hitch hatchery to repopulate the hitch?
I mean, that's come up in the past. Two things. When that first came up, our regional manager, and I believe he was right at the time too. Is the hatcheries generally they can help out and assist, but two things was the possibility of reintroducing hitch into the lake that might have a pathogen that the lake itself population isn't aware of, and then just completely taking out that the in-lake population, and which can be really scary. That's the last thing we would want to do, is introduce something that the in-lake hitch aren't used to. And the second thing is, it seems it's more of like a Band-Aid on like a gunshot wound. If we need to make sure that the lake itself can take care of itself. The hatchery is just it's a patch. It's really literally a patch. A lake like this size, we stock, the department stocks fish, plants them, raises them, to be able to like raise enough hitch in a hatchery, and at the cost and the water quality in the summer. I mean, there's a lot of factors that involve, and I don't think the efficiency would be there. It'd be costly, and with a lake like this, it's not the way to go. We need to figure out the internal problems a little bit better, and make the lake self-sustaining so it can take care of itself, and the hitch can do well without any human assistance.
Great. And so I have 2 more questions. One of them I think is more geared towards Felipe, so I'll save that for him after the rest of the presentations. So the final question for you is there any viability to selling the carp to crabbers as bait and using that as a way to get more funding for future projects?
Yeah, I've reached out to Crabbing Network. I've reached out to a lot of people, and with the cat and dog foods, but I have not got any feedback. But that's just saying I personally haven't. But if anyone else, I know the crabbing. I don't know how good the carp would be used for crab bait. I'm not saying it's going to be good or bad, but if people want to use it, please reach out to us. And if you know people that would use it for crab bait, I don't have a problem. I don't think anyone helping us assist collecting these carp and goldfish would have any problem donating them, because right now they're just being used as fertilizer on the tribal lands, and which is great, but if there's more ways for people to utilize them in the community, because I think we're building up an infrastructure to get more carp and goldfish collected. So being able to, there might be some big numbers coming this way. So you guys are more than welcome to them.
Great, thank you, Ben. We will move to our final presentation of the evening, and I'll welcome Chris Childers and Angela DePalma Dow from Lake County Department of Water Resources.
Thanks, Rebecca. My name is Angela DePalma Dow. I am in Lake County Water Resources Watershed Protection District, and I'm going to do the first presentation here, and then after I talk about stuff, then Chris will take over and talk about community outreach and engagement with Hitch. And briefly, just going to talk about kind of going back before everybody else's presentation and talking about the contribution to declines in Hitch, because that's going to directly tie into the specific projects that the district is doing right now within the watershed and also in the lake shorelines. And then we're going to have a slide where you can find out more information, and then Chris will talk about community science. So briefly, low flows in streams, shoreline habitat loss, barrier, so how fish can get up to spawn, and then how juveniles can migrate downstream, in-stream barriers, where they physically can't move up the stream because of sediment or other things that were built in the stream or accumulate, water and land use changes. I'm going to focus on that a lot, and then all of these tie into water quality declines both in the creeks, watershed, and within the lake. So I'm going to talk a lot about stream modification, and the term for that is hydromodification. And hydromodified creeks, this was a fun thing that everybody loved to do in the turn of the last century, right? If we could build it, let's do it. Why even question why we would not do that? So here, Lake County has a lot of hydromodified creeks. And the goal for this was to move the water fast. Let's get the water off the streets, off the land, and move it as fast as possible. We're going to convey it as fast as possible down the straight, hardened channel. We also make more space for us to build things. So this is kind of the goal for hydromodified channels. This is a cool pamphlet I found in our office upstairs. This is Adobe Creek Channel. Does anybody know where this is? Anybody? Yeah? The bottom right photo, do you know where that is? Has anybody seen Adobe Creek look like that? Not in a long time, right? So the length of Adobe Creek Channel is 2.4 miles. This is in the Big Valley Basin. The average depth is about 7 feet when they modified it. The average width is 60 feet. 60 feet. That's a lot of water. Where is Adobe Creek 60 feet wide? It's average too. So that means there's some parts that are what, like 100 feet wide? Adobe Creek, you drive over it on Soda Bay Road and it's like tiny. So they excavated 136,000 cubic yards, and then the design capacity was able to move 1325 cubic feet per second, which is a lot for a little Adobe Creek. So this is what Adobe Creek looked like when they modified it. So this is not an image from Lake County. This is actually from the Leolit River in British Columbia, but this is from a great publication that shows a non-hydromodified channel on the left and a hydromodified channel on the right. So we're talking about stream straightening here, which directly contributes to loss of habitat and flows. So creeks, much like here in Lake County, originally meander. Look at this meander. Woo, this S shape. Woo, going around. Lots of space. Look at all that groundwater recharge, right? You get a lot of water in here. There's deposits of sediment, and the creek moves, goes around it. Vegetation can grow in. The creek can move, grow around that. And then you have these little connected floodplains and areas that accumulate a lot of water. It can recharge and then create floodplains and rich wetland areas for fish and other habitat. However, meanders have been systematically cut off. So the channels have been straightened right here on the right. You can see that with the thought, again, to improve the flow, reduce flooding. So we can get the water to move as fast as possible off the landscape. Also, so we can have all the space here for things like development, settlements, ag, other land uses. What actually happened on the long term is you get all this material that comes down the river from the uplands and has no place to go. There's no meander for it to collect. So it'll just drop along the creek, fill in, and then you have flooding off of the channel. You also don't have as much space for groundwater recharge. So compared to the left image, look at all that surface area of water. As it's going, it slows down around the curves and sinks into the ground. We don't have that here in this channel. Again, the goal is to move the water as fast as possible off the land. So you're not giving it time to sink in. You remove a lot of habitat, especially if you harden the shorelines, like that last photo of Adobe Creek. There's not fun places for Hitch to want to hang out there on the side of those creeks. And then as the sediment accumulates, you add a lot of additional flood risk because it's going to fill in and the water's just going to go over the sides. And one thing, you might be asking yourself, well, yeah, you have to maintain that channel. You got to remove all the sediment. Okay, we're Lake County. We don't make enough money to do that. So that is not a realistic goal for all of the creeks that we have at this point in time, and hasn't been for the last basically 30 years, 20, 30 years. Jessica talked a little bit about she talked a lot actually about how we have less rain during certain time periods, which means low flows. So both low flows as far as low velocity, but also low to the ground. It's actually shallow. And here you have a photo or a video of some Hitch. They're going to spawn. They're going to go up and they're going to do their business. They're going to spawn. And you guys know how it is here in, April. We get water and then we get really hot days and it's going to dry out. So they're going to spawn in a couple days. A lot of those eggs are going to be out there exposed on the dry bed and they're not going to survive. The Hitch don't know that. They're doing their thing. So this is really important too, is just we're trying to get the water, or the system was built to move the water as fast as possible off the land. So we have less water in the system combined with less rain. So we're still going to see fish in the systems when there's water, but we're not going to see that success in the recruitment of the juveniles or the egg hatch. Okay, then we have a system like this in Coal Creek. So again, hydromodified channel here is the yellow straightened channel, and historic Coal Creek used to go all the way around here at the base of Mount Canocti. Look how much water they get. You know, Big Valley, you guys might be a little jealous. They're getting all this extra water that sits there until June. And guess what? What time there's water like that, there's Hitch. There's Hitch flopping all in there. Right now, the property owners are out there. It's flooded, and they're as soon as the Hitch come up, they're going to be going everywhere that there's water. Imagine like this straight little channel. How did all of this water go down that channel? It doesn't, right? So a project or area like this has a lot of significant issues that all started with some hydromodification and a straightening of a channel that is very undersized for what it needs to accommodate. Not to mention the flood impact and the accessibility for that community to be able to get to their homes and get out to the roads to get to what they need to do. In-stream barriers. So this is another thing that several of the presenters talked about. This is an old map. It's not outdated, but the Water Board and CDFW is working on updating Hitch barrier mapping and then prioritizing them, right? Because we can't do all the projects all at once. So we have to prioritize the most high impact fish passage barriers to address. There's certain ones like Kelsey Creek Main Street Bridge. This is a county weir that was installed to protect the Main Street Bridge, which is really important to that community. And it is a big barrier. Hitch are not going to be able to get over this flow or the fish ladder that is installed there. Adobe Creek at Bell Hill. I'll have another slide about this, but this is basically a full cement bridge with some culverts. And so the flow is really strong through these culverts, and the fish can't really get up the upstream to spawn. Here's a fish barrier that was actually removed, and a restored fish ladder in Lower Sigler Canyon Creek in Lower Lake was actually put in. And so this is an example of what a restored fish ladder looks like. It's gorgeous, right? And you can still accommodate the hitch and the variety of habitat there. So in the lake, shorelines are very important. So after the fish come down, they migrate. After they spawn, and then after they the juveniles come down from the creeks, they're right there in the shore zone. So they need a lot of variety and habitat in the shore zone for refuge and food sources. And this is a very specialized niche habitat, and it's consistently and constantly changing, right? The shoreline this year for our lake is going to be at a totally different spot than it was last year and 2 years ago. And so that shoreline is constantly changing in our lake. But the shorelines in the lake are very healthy to hitch recovery. Okay, this map is not great. I understand that. It's got lots of globs on it, but it really shows the geographic scope of all the district projects that we have going on right now that address a lot of those contributing factors to the hitch that I just covered. And this is the list. I'm going to go through each one briefly. I have a cross-section of Clover Creek down here, the engineering designs, the as-builts, because engineering is essential to 90% of all the projects we do, and it is one of the barriers to be able to get good engineers and good engineering and hydrology for these projects is one of the barriers, and why it takes so long to get stuff done. So one of the first projects we have is improving stream habitat. This is a Caltrans project. It's from mitigation funds. We got about $250,000 from Caltrans for the Clover Creek diversion off Elk Mountain Road to Middle Creek. And there's a lot of veg there, right? There's a cute little creek that goes in there. This is a manufactured channel with levees. Hitch go up the stream. We see them. There's a lot of veg. There's a lot of sedimentation. I just went out there earlier this week. Here's that creek. There's some big trees in there. This is that blackberry. Somebody talked about the Himalayan blackberry, asked a question about it. So the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance, or TERRA, and our staff went out and cleared this. It's probably, I don't know, like a 50-foot stretch by maybe 15 feet. They'd had 3 sections of those. It is thick blackberry, and this is kind of like a negative feedback loop because the water flows down, it drops sediment. The sediment is really nice habitat for that blackberry to grow. The blackberry grows, you see it's wintertime, it doesn't lose its leaves. And then as flows come down in the winter, all that blackberry material catches all that sediment and traps it again in the stream, and you have both blackberry veg buildup and sedimentation, and that just keeps happening until you remove both of those things. So we have a project that is going to both get rid of all the blackberry and then actually come through with heavy equipment to remove those roots and the sedimentation there. Understanding flows and barriers in the Scotts Creek and Tule Lake watershed. So this is a task from a grant we got from the Wildlife Conservation Board. So this is about, total for this task, about $1.2 million. This is a picture I took a few years ago. So on the left, that nice, beautiful, clear side, that's the flows from Middle Creek. On the right, in that beautiful brown, is the Scotts Creek. And USGS and UC Davis just did a big 5-year project of the watershed and identified that Scotts Creek is the #1 contributor to materials into Clear Lake. And this photo demonstrates that, right? We always used to think it was Middle Creek, but Scotts Creek actually contributes the most turbidity materials into Clear Lake. Going further upstream of this picture into Scotts Creek, this is the culvert that actually connects the Scotts Creek south of Tule Lake to the Scotts Creek that leads to here. This is like a 6-foot culvert, guys, and it's squashed. This is definitely a hitch barrier. It definitely contributes to water quality, and this is definitely a barrier and something that interferes with the full functioning and form of Scotts Creek. So this grant is going to design, the engineering design for how to replace this culvert or remove it, whatever's best to both allow Hitch to access Scotts Creek and Tule Lake, and then also just improve the overall system form and function. And part of this project was a preliminary, we did some drone footage of the whole Scotts Creek and Tule Lake watershed, some very nice high quality drone footage. And we actually went out with Robinson Rancheria, CDFW. I don't know if HABEMATOLEL was there. Big Valley, I think you guys were there. And we did some Hitch sampling. So this is one of the former, I guess, like pumping drainage ditches in Tule Lake before all of the infrastructure was removed and it's a recreated wetland. And we found about 10% of Hitch in there in a small little backpack electroshocking survey. So there are Hitch using Tule Lake. It is valuable to restore and to understand how it contributes to the rest of the Scotts Creek watershed. Further, in the Middle Creek area, so of course the Middle Creek Restoration Project, this is funded by Army Corps. I think we got like $20 million that's being spent to purchase parcels. There's still about 25-ish parcels that need to be purchased for this all to be restored to Robinson Lake, which will provide vital Hitch habitat. Moving to the lake, so shoreline improvements. We have a grant through the Department of Pesticide Regulation that one of our partners, Terra, Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance, and Bullfrog Diving Underwater Services is helping us execute. We got about $350,000 for this grant, and part of it is to remove shoreline invasive species like creeping water primrose. This is at the state park. If you guys go to state park this summer and you go to the boat ramp, it looks glorious because of this grant. And this is in Cache Creek where folks are removing primrose. And then we go in the wintertime and plant tules. So wherever we move primrose, we plant tules. And it's a great way to restore some of that native habitat. And this grant also allowed us to provide this service for private properties. So we can go in, remove primrose on private properties, and then come back and plant tules in the winter on those private properties, which is a great asset. This is one of the fish barriers. So Ben called me out to talk about this, the Bell Hill Road culvert replacement. So this is also from the Wildlife Conservation Board grant. We have about $600,000 for the engineering planning design phase of this. So here is Adobe Creek at Bell Hill Road crossing. It's got these culverts. This is a little hitch that's kind of getting flattened by that flow as he's trying to jump into that culvert. And we have a contract with Coastland that we're finalizing, and they're going to help design this culvert replacement to look something like this with the bottomless culverts or a bridge. Whatever's best to maintain the integrity of the stream structure, provide access for Hitch, and also protect the nearby properties. We don't want to contribute any erosion or flood risks to the properties downstream or around that area. And the Department of Public Works is also a partner on this project. Somebody asked a question about Highland Springs, like why don't we just open the gate and let Highland Springs fill in the creek? Yeah, we want to be able to do that. We have to figure out the capacity for Highland Creek. So this is from that same flyer that I shared earlier. Here is Highland Creek Reservoir and the dam and the Adobe Creek Dam. They're sister dams. They were built the same couple years. And Highland Springs Recreation Area, that is currently right now the Watershed Protection District manages that, and it is focused on recreation. So it's there to provide recreational and flood protection. That's the purpose. Adobe Creek is not really a recreational reservoir. It's strictly for stormwater and flood protection. So we do have funds from both the Wildlife Conservation Board to figure out how we can adjust Highland Springs Reservoir. So we make the reservoir bigger, store more water, and then how do we change the dam and the operation schedule so we can both provide recreation and we can allow flows to go down Highland Creek to Adobe Creek to maximize the habitat flows for Hitch during the spawning migration season and to provide groundwater recharge when we have dry periods. If we drained it right now when it needed for Hitch flows, and then throughout the summer for groundwater recharge, it would go dry. We need to figure out how we can have enough water stored there so that won't happen. Also, people always ask us, just open the gate on Adobe Creek and let that drain out. Once the water in Adobe Creek gets really low, like a couple inches after the dam, and you open Adobe Creek Dam, you have like 11 days before it drains. And it doesn't go all the way to the lake, and it actually causes more pooling and stranding. We did a test for that a couple years ago. Oh, I will say, what did I say? Okay, so it's almost $1 million we have from the Wildlife Conservation Board and Mike Thompson to do update feasibility studies and get engineering designs together to figure out how we can upgrade both of those reservoirs to provide that water storage capability for the Big Valley Basin area and to provide those in-stream flows for Hitch. This is what downstream looked like before those reservoirs were in place. So anybody that says, well, let's just break down the reservoir. Okay, maybe, but then you're going to have this problem. And maybe Adobe Creek Reservoir, this is my personal opinion and doesn't reflect that of the county, but maybe Adobe Creek Reservoir maybe could be taken down or modified severely, but we don't know. That's why we're getting money to do a feasibility study and figure that out. So this is also, these were such huge engineering projects that any engineering designs, water rights, environmental, we have tribal partners that are going to be with us for the planning stage of these projects from the beginning to the very end throughout the completion. This is Highland Creek Dam on the top, and this is Adobe Creek Reservoir on the bottom. These were huge, huge engineering projects, and so they deserve a lot of effort time to do any modifications for those structures and that infrastructure. So this is Coal Creek Planning and Restoration. This is a project we've just started in the last year, and we have started the Coal Creek Advisory Collaborative with partners from Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Big Valley, EPA, and a lot of the private property owners, and also the state park is a partner on there too. And it's for about roughly 1.5 miles in Coal Creek, where there's a lot of sediment buildup, and we're applying for grants to do the restoration plan design, both to remove the short-term sediment removal that's in there, replace some culverts, and then do a long-term restoration plan. So what else can we do? Well, I talked some about natural shorelines, but there's some areas on the lake or streams where we can't really change the shorelines, right? We can't really get rid of some of this existing structure. So we did an assessment in 2021, 2022 to figure out where on the lake there are shorelines that are natural shorelines that are providing a great habitat currently, and areas in the lake where there's shorelines that could be improved. So the red are the areas where it's poor shoreline, and the green are those natural shoreline areas. And so we're able to use that information from that survey to best improve shorelines within Clear Lake and maximize the efforts. We can also promote stream restoration by maintaining creeks, removing debris. And this was touched on by Felipe. Thank you for talking about what property owners can do. So this was an area in Coal Creek. We helped a property owner here, and then further downstream, we saw this big, huge debris pile. Across the bank was a grow operation. We were able to get their phone number, called them, talked to them, and then the next day they were able to go through with some of their staff. They chainsawed some of this up and pulled it out, and now that creek is reconnected. They were worried they were going to get somebody to come in and slap them with a permit violation for not having a permit. And so it really was just communicating, letting them know, no, you guys can walk in there, you can chainsaw that up, and then you could hook it to your tractor and pull it out. But you can't go in with a loader and mechanically remove it, and you can't do anything with the sediment. But it was really helpful to talk to them, and now they're going to keep their eye on that section of creek and remove debris as it comes in. But there's a lot of creek, a lot of property owners that we might have to talk to about that. So where can you learn more? Visit the Hitch website. This is maintained by Chris and our technician Taylor. They update it with lots of information. Like they just put up this attention flyer with some nice, beautiful photos of the Sacramento sucker, which is in the creeks right now. There's a couple places with some hitch, but this is the #1 species that gets confused with hitch because it comes up early in the year. They're big fish, so you see them easily, and usually a lot of people call us and tell us there's hitch, and it's Sacramento sucker. So they update the website with lots of information there, and then there's lots of links and resources available. And thank you. That's it for me. I didn't put my contact information on here because I'm actually moving to the Lake County Land Trust. So if you have any questions for Watershed Protection District, you will send them to Chris, and all his contact information is up there. So thank you very much. And thank you, Sam, for doing the tech tonight. Sam is amazing.
Yes, thanks, Sam. Before we move to Chris's portion of the presentation, I just want to allow for any questions that anybody has for Angela. So I've got one here, Angela, and it reads, most of the recent hitch visuals have been in Coal Creek versus Kelsey Creek. Is messing with Coal Creek flow the best thing to do for the hitch spawning?
Yes. So I would say Kelsey Creek has historic mining operations on it. And as much as that removed materials from the creek and altered the creek, if you go down to Kelsey Creek, there is actually a lot of variety of habitat there. And there's some floodplain and meander allowing with Kelsey Creek because they were getting in and moving, mining for the gravel. That created a bigger creek. So now there's actually places for that creek to meander. Whereas if you look at Coal Creek, it's straightened, and there's too much water and that goes through that system, and too much sediment that is accumulated in Coal Creek that now all the water can't actually be in the creek. So there actually is no creek. In Coal Creek, from the base of Mount Canocti to Soda Bay Road, there is no creek. It's basically the same level as the road and the field next to it. So if the question is asking me, is it better to mess with the flows in Coal Creek versus Kelsey Creek? I would say yes, because the creek in Coal Creek is actually not a creek. And the amount of rescues that the tribes and partners from the county and the state do in Coal Creek is like in the triple digits sometimes, like of how much effort is there compared. Do you guys do any rescues on Kelsey Creek? Yeah? Oh, in pools within the creek, right? Yeah, not outside of the creek though, right? No. Yeah, so right now there's fish going outside of Coal Creek that need to be rescued. So it is a higher priority. In my humble opinion, it doesn't reflect that of the partners. Hope that answered the question. I think I know who wrote that question too. And we've talked about this before.
Great. One more question. Are any studies being done on flows in Upper Coal Creek and tributaries? Same for Upper Kelsey Creek. Have there been any studies to look into feasibility of replacing Coal Creek Dam or installing a dam on Kelsey Creek?
So the question is just, has there been studies on those?
Yes. And is there, maybe reason to pursue studies if there haven't been any?
So the Coal Creek Advisory Collaborative does have a focus on the entire Coal Creek sub-watershed. The district is just focusing on the area, the 1.5 mile between Soda Bay and the base of Mount Canocti, because the multi-benefit, the impact to flood and infrastructure and the amount of Hitch rescues that are done in that area is all focused in that area. So that's what, as the district, that's what we're charged with kind of focusing on and allocating resources to. But the other partners on the Coal Creek Advisory Collaborative, we're all focused on the whole watershed. We actually assigned reaches, and it goes all the way up to the upper watershed for Coal Creek. So it's not out of our focus. There have not been studies that I'm aware of outside of the flow study that CDFW is doing. I think Coal Creek was included in the 6. I don't know how high up it goes in the watershed. But yeah. And then the study for Kelsey Creek, I don't know so Kelsey Creek is interesting because the fish ladder, the Main Street fish ladder currently restricts Hitch passage. So it's kind of like we have to deal with the fish passage downstream, and then we can look about studying upstream. But we would love studies on everything.
Great. Any other questions for Angela? Perfect. Just want to thank Angela. She's been helping today with queuing presentations and a few of the other administrative tasks. So thank you, Angela. And we will move to our final presentation from Chris Childers, also with the Lake County Department of Water Resources.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Childers of the Lake County Water Resources Department. Some of you have already seen this presentation, but for those of you who have not, I want everybody to know what we've been working on as well. Another project that has come forward. So before my time at Water Resources, there was a talk of community science Hitch spawner observation, and this came across my desk, and there's a need for it. So this year, myself and Taylor, along with CDFW folks, kind of talked about like what would this look like. We want to base it off of what CDFW is doing, so the data that is collected can be used for like long-term management decisions. So we'll just start it out with definition. What is community science? It's a form of research that provides everyone, regardless of their background, an opportunity to contribute meaningful data to further our scientific understanding of key issues. So in simple terms, community science is basically public participation in scientific research. So we have our purpose goal slide here. So we want to monitor the relative population trends over time to help with long-term management decisions. Kind of like what Ben was saying earlier, this is a relative population study. This type of monitoring is beneficial because we want to see presence, absence, and before and after creek restoration projects and barrier removal efforts. Community involvement, education, outreach, engagement is key. So thank you everyone for being here tonight and allowing me to present and engaging with you. So we also want to understand what extent Hitch occupy creeks, what creeks are occupied, and how far upstream Hitch migrate to spawn. When do the Hitch enter these specific creeks, and how long do they occupy each creek? So obviously they're going to enter creeks at a certain temperature, right? And each creek is going to be a different temperature. So we want to study that. We want to know what's going on there a little bit more. So the design of the study, basically all the volunteers are required to attend a once yearly training. There are in-person and field components. So the in-person is like a 2-hour class, and then we go out in the field for about half an hour and do a mock survey on survey 1, 2, 3. The sites are already pre-selected by the department for repeatability. So the locations are monitored once a week for 10 weeks, starting March 9th. So they actually started this week, and we've had a lot of submissions so far. All these are on bridge crossings. We do allow like a pre-selected. You adopt a pre-selected public site each year. So ideally 1 site per person. This year we didn't get all of our sites filled up, so we offered if people want to take 2 sites, they can. And thank you for people that did take 2 sites. So we also do private property sponsored sites. So we want like a 5 to 10 year commitment for the private property sites, just so we can look at this data over time and make management decisions. 1 year is not going to do any good because we need to look at it like what happened last year and the year before, and then we can say, okay, here's a trend. So the design is fairly simple. It's on survey 123. You put your name in. Basically, you say, can this survey be conducted? Are there obstructions? Is water present? If there's no water, you're not going to be able to conduct the survey. Visibility, it helps with the validation process. So if it's very murky, you're not going to be able to see anything. And obviously, you probably wouldn't have a very good survey. And then confidence. It's okay not to be confident, right? So if you see a fish and you're like, I'm not sure if that's a hitch, well, don't report it as a hitch, you know. If you're confident, then report it as a hitch. So we have like a little bit of survey validation. I talked about this a little bit, but we'll go into it. So if the site conditions are not ideal, then the survey would not be conducted, and a reason would be listed. For example, the creek would be dry or too turbid, or there's some kind of bloom, whether it be cyanobacteria bloom, floating vegetation, right? So you can see all these pictures here, and on the right-hand side, these are all scenarios where a survey would not be conducted. We got a zola, we have duckweed, cyano bloom, turbidity, and a dry creek. Water visibility, we just talked about that. It reduces your ability to positively ID fish species. And then your confidence, how confident are you? Also, this data is randomly selected for quality control purposes. So we'll double check in the field if we get a report of there's, 500 fish or 1,000 hitch somewhere. As long as it's not on private property, we're going to go take a look at it. Also, with that, we're going to look at some of these sites that, just randomly, right? And take a look and just make sure the data that's coming in is correct. So here are our 33 sites. As you can see, all the black dots on the map, the sites are all over the lake. So Big Valley is covered by CDFW very well, and also Big Valley Rancheria, so Alfred over there. And we decided to do a bunch of other sites, like especially in Lower Lake and Upper Lake. Upper Lake is covered also by HABEMATOLEL and Robinson. But we got all these sites in here, and currently we have 31 out of our 33 sites filled, which is amazing. And I can't say thank you more than enough, because this is something that it's just amazing how the community has come together and really stepped up and helped us out with this data collection. So we'll just talk a little bit about fish ID. We have native and introduced fishes of Clear Lake. We have some brochures up here if you guys want to pick one up on your way out. On the left here in the green is the native fishes. On the right is the introduced fishes. Quickly, we'll talk about fish ID. So this is a Sacramento sucker. Bottom left there in the creek. Top right is probably like what you would be looking at if you're at a bridge crossing. So you kind of have to stand there for a minute and kind of get an idea of, is it a sucker, is it a hitch? Suckers are pretty easy to identify when they're in the creeks because they have these spawning stripes, as you can see in the bottom right there. They have a dark stripe down their side, and then also their fins on their pelvic fin it's very large, and it is very like white or like bright color. So that's a very easily identifiable aspect for those fish. So we have Clear Lake Hitch here. There's an adult bottom left, and then in the bottom right there's a school of them. Also, like, the hitch are usually up a little bit higher in the water column than the suckers. The suckers usually they stick more so to the bottom. So this is why we do this training, and this is why we want the people trained for our program. One of the reasons, at least, is because we have another fish in this lake called a Sacramento blackfish, and it is very easily confused with the Clear Lake Hitch. The major difference between these two fish is the blackfish have very small scales, and the hitch have much larger scales. Blackfish also typically don't go past like the first or second riffle in any of the creeks, at least that I've seen, and other scientists in the community. So they don't travel very far up the creeks. They usually stay at the creek mouths. So our trainings, to date we have conducted 2 trainings. Trainings are mandatory. So we've already done 2, and we started our program this year. We'll be doing the same again next year. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, grab my card. We'll be doing this again next year. And we have we did the training workshop with in person, and it had the classroom and field training. Thanks to Taylor, she helped out a lot with that as well. So yeah, any questions, comments?
If you have any questions for Chris, go ahead and put a note card up. If not, we'll accept questions for any of the presenters from this evening. So any questions for Chris? Great. Looks like there's none. Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the presentation, and I know there's a few of us who participated in the training here in the room. So happy to contribute to the information that's being collected.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. So I do have a question to revisit for Felipe. Oh, I've got a card. Is it for Chris? No, it's a general card. Great. Thank you. So I'll go ahead with this question for you, Felipe. The question is, on days you do stream clearing, can you use volunteers? And if so, would it be possible to put out dates, spots, and times so that community members can help?
Yes, so the stream clearing that the department does in coordination with the California Conservation Corps does not take volunteers that I'm aware of, though we have really benefited from some resources that the county has provided, and just mainly in trucks to haul the vegetation away. I could put you in touch with Nathan Cullen, who coordinates that work, to see if they do take volunteers, but I'm not sure what sort of waivers would be needed. However, I know there's a lot of folks that can't get out into the streams and clear, do the work themselves. So if there are groups that want to form together and do a community effort to do stream bed clearing, I would highly encourage that. If you're really raring to go do some brush clearing, I'm sure you're going to find somebody that'll take you up on it, I guess is my point. But as far as I know, we don't take volunteers, though I think Ben takes volunteers for some of his fish surveys. But I think for the CCC work, because it's somewhat dangerous work, I'm not sure if they take volunteers. So sorry if to let you down. But Angela, if you want to coordinate stream clearing, I'll just volunteer you for that.
Great. So the next question, we can go ahead and choose who answers this. I think it would probably be a question for you again, Felipe, so you might not want to run too far. The question is, the proposed federal listing currently exempts certain activities. If the federal listing is approved, then what would be some limiting conditions to Clear Lake and other water bodies or waterways identified as Hitch habitat?
That's a tough question. I'm probably not the best person to answer that. For the department, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Fish and Wildlife Service, so our work would not be interrupted as far as we wouldn't need additional permits. What would happen, my understanding of the federal process, and keep in mind I'm a state employee, I'm not a representative of the federal government, is that they would have to designate critical habitat and issue a biological opinion for impacts to Hitch. I'm not exactly sure how that would play out in Lake County. There's a lot of unknowns with the listing right now. So again, I'm sorry I don't have all that information. I do know our work would be able to continue, but there may be some other permitting required for a federally listed species.
Thanks, Felipe. And I know Jared Sellers with Fish and Wildlife, that might be a better question for him. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us due to the freeze on federal employee travel. So if you'd like that question answered by him, happy to connect you via email or send it over and get a response back. So any other general questions for any of the presenters? Jessica from the State Water Resource Control Board, Daniela, Angela, Felipe, Ben, any questions? Okay, well, seeing none, just want to thank you all for coming. Again, if you have any questions afterwards or if you need any meeting materials, feel free to reach out to us, and have a safe evening.